The streets of downtown Chicago were bustling as the evening rush hour set in. Cars lined up at red lights, pedestrians hurried across intersections, and the air buzzed with the sounds of city life. Among the steady flow of traffic, a sleek black BMW made a smooth turn onto Wabash Avenue. Inside sat Olivia Carter, dressed in an elegant navy blue pantsuit, her curly black hair cascading over her shoulders. She had just wrapped up a long day at the courthouse and was on her way home. As she approached a stop sign, flashing red and blue lights suddenly lit up her rearview mirror. A sharp sigh escaped her lips. Not again. She pulled over, keeping both hands on the steering wheel as she watched two officers approach, one on each side of her car. The taller one, Officer Briggs, tapped on her window with unnecessary force. "License and registration," he demanded, his voice laced with authority. Olivia remained composed. "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" Briggs exchanged a smirk with his partner, Officer Denton, who was already resting his hand on his holstered gun. "Just routine. You were driving a little too slow back there." She arched a brow. "Driving too slow? That's a new one." Without argument, Olivia retrieved her license and registration, handing them over. Briggs snatched them, scanning her ID briefly before his smirk widened. "Olivia Carter, huh? What brings you out here?" "I live here," she replied evenly. Denton suddenly yanked open her door. "Step out of the car, ma'am." Olivia inhaled sharply. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he said, gripping her arm. "Step out." Her heartbeat quickened, but she remained calm. If they thought she would cower, they were sorely mistaken. They had no idea who they had just pulled over. Olivia Carter stepped out of her BMW, her posture straight and unwavering. She could feel the eyes of passing drivers and pedestrians lingering on the scene, sensing the tension in the air. Officer Denton tightened his grip on her arm as if expecting her to resist. "Turn around," Briggs ordered. "For what reason?" Olivia asked, her voice calm but firm. Briggs smirked. "Suspicion of stolen property. We've had reports of a vehicle matching this description being involved in criminal activity." Olivia's jaw clenched. She knew this game all too well, fabricating excuses to justify racial profiling. "This is my car. My name is on the registration you're holding," she reminded them. Denton scoffed. "We'll see about that." Without another word, he spun her around, roughly pushing her against the side of her car. Gasps from onlookers rippled through the crowd forming on the sidewalk. A woman pulled out her phone, already recording. "You're making a mistake," Olivia warned. "Yeah," Briggs sneered. "And what are you going to do about it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she allowed them to slap the cold steel of handcuffs onto her wrists. She knew exactly how this would play out. Briggs grabbed his radio. "We got a suspect in custody, taking her in." As the officers led Olivia to their squad car, a murmur spread among the growing crowd. "Wait, isn't that Olivia Carter?" someone whispered. "She looks familiar," another said. It wouldn't take long for someone to connect the dots. But by the time the officers realized their mistake, it would already be too late. They had just arrested the most powerful prosecutor in the state. Inside the squad car, Olivia sat calmly, her hands cuffed behind her back. Officer Briggs and Denton sat in the front, talking among themselves, unaware of the storm they had just unleashed. "You see the way she acted?" Briggs scoffed. "Like she was above the law." Denton chuckled. "Yeah, probably thought she could talk her way out of this." Olivia let out a slow breath, keeping her composure. She had spent years dealing with men like them, officers who abused their power and assumed they could get away with it. But this time, they had picked the wrong person. The car pulled into the station, and as soon as they parked, Olivia was yanked out. She didn't resist, didn't argue. Instead, she glanced around and saw a few officers staring in her direction, eyebrows furrowed as if recognizing her. Briggs led her inside, past the booking desk. The young officer behind the desk glanced at Olivia, then did a double take. His face paled. Sir, I think—" "Not now," Briggs snapped, pushing Olivia toward a holding area. Before he could take another step, a deep voice cut through the tension. "Stop right there." Briggs turned, his irritation clear, until he saw who had spoken. Captain Reynolds, the head of the precinct, stood at the entrance, his eyes locked on Olivia. His face turned a shade of gray as he realized who was standing before him. "You just arrested Olivia Carter," Reynolds said slowly, "the state's chief prosecutor." Silence filled the room. Every officer turned to look at the woman standing between Briggs and Denton, their faces shifting from confusion to sheer horror. Olivia finally broke her silence. She lifted her chin and spoke with quiet authority. "Now," she said, "shall we discuss how this department plans to handle the unlawful arrest of a state official?" Briggs and Denton felt their stomachs drop. They were in serious trouble. A heavy silence fell over the priest as Captain Reynolds' words sank in. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, the realization dawning on them like a slow-moving storm. Briggs' throat went dry. That's not possible," he stammered, looking at Olivia as if seeing her for the first time. "She was resisting arrest." Olivia let out a soft, humorless chuckle. "Resisting arrest? For what crime exactly, Officer Briggs? Walking while black?" Denton's face was ghostly white. We didn't know who she was," he muttered under his breath. Reynolds exhaled sharply and rubbed his temples. "And that's the problem," he snapped. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to ask. You profiled her, you assumed, and now you've made the biggest mistake of your damn careers." The young officer at the booking desk swallowed hard, looking between Olivia and Reynolds. "Captain, what do we do now?" Olivia turned to Reynolds, her gaze steady. "First, you take these cuffs off me." Reynolds didn't hesitate. He gestured to the desk officer, who rushed forward, fumbling with the key. The moment Olivia's wrists were free, she rubbed them lightly but kept her posture composed. "Miss Carter," Reynolds said carefully, "I deeply apologize for this incident." "Oh, we're far past apologies," Olivia said coldly. "Do you have any idea how much trouble your department is in?" Briggs clenched his fists, his pride flaring up. "We were just doing our jobs," he snapped. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Your job is to uphold the law, not violate people's rights." Denton shifted uncomfortably. "It was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Olivia's voice was razor sharp. "You threw me against a car. You denied me my right to speak. And you were moments away from booking the state's chief prosecutor without probable cause." The weight of her words settled over the room like a thick fog. Briggs and Denton were suddenly very aware of the dozens of eyes watching them, officers whispering among themselves. Reynolds straightened his posture. "Miss Carter, what happens next is up to you." Olivia crossed her arms. "Oh, trust me, Captain. What happens next will change this department forever." Briggs and Denton exchanged nervous glances. They were about to learn just how powerful Olivia Carter truly was. Olivia took a deep breath, pulling out her phone with slow, deliberate movements. The precinct was dead silent. Every officer in the room knew that whatever call she was about to make would determine their fate. Briggs and Denton shifted uneasily, beads of sweat forming on their brows. They had thrown a powerful woman into handcuffs, and now the weight of their actions was sinking in. Olivia dialed a number and placed the phone to her ear. Within seconds, a voice answered. "Olivia?" the voice asked, firm yet calm. "It's me," Olivia said, her voice controlled but laced with irritation. "I need you at the 7th Precinct, now." There was a pause. "What happened?" Olivia's eyes locked onto Briggs and Denton, her expression unreadable. "I was unlawfully detained and mistreated by officers who had no idea who I was. It's time to have that conversation we've been postponing." "I'll be there in 10 minutes." The call ended. Olivia placed her phone back in her pocket and turned to Reynolds. "You'd better hope your officers are prepared to explain themselves." Reynolds exhaled, nodding stiffly. "Understood." Briggs took a step forward, frustration etched across his face. "Who the hell was that?" "My boss," Olivia answered coolly. "The Attorney General." A stunned hush swept through the room. Briggs' mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Denton looked as if he'd been hit by a truck. "Wait, you don't mean," Denton started, his voice weak. "Yes," Olivia cut him off. "The state's highest legal authority, the person who can review police misconduct cases, order investigations, and bring legal action against corrupt officers." Briggs swallowed hard. "Listen, Save it," Olivia interrupted. "You're out of excuses. You knew what you were doing. You assumed I was a criminal. You treated me like one. And now the people with the real power are about to get involved." The tension in the room was suffocating. Officers whispered among themselves, some stepping back as if distancing themselves from Briggs and Denton. The front doors of the precinct suddenly burst open. A team of sharply dressed officials entered, their presence commanding immediate attention. At the center of them was a tall, formidable woman in a navy blue suit, Attorney General Vanessa Hughes. She wasn't here for small talk. She was here for justice. The room felt like it had lost all its air the moment Attorney General Vanessa Hughes stepped inside. Her sharp, calculating eyes scanned the precinct, taking in every detail, every officer frozen in place, every whisper that died in the air as she passed. She wasn't just here to visit. She was here to take control. Briggs and Denton immediately straightened, trying to look composed, but their nervous shifting betrayed them. They had no idea that the woman they had arrested had a direct line to the most powerful prosecutor in the state. Vanessa's gaze landed on Olivia. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her tone firm but filled with genuine concern. Olivia shook her head. "Not physically. But what happened tonight wasn't just about me. It's about a system that allows this kind of abuse to continue." Vanessa nodded, turning her attention to Captain Reynolds. "Explain," she ordered, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Reynolds cleared his throat, struggling to keep his composure. "There was a misunderstanding. My officers didn't recognize Ms. Brooks and—" "Stop," Vanessa raised a hand. "Let me make this easy for you, Captain. Did your officers have probable cause to detain and arrest her?" Reynolds hesitated, then sighed. "No." Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. "Did they mistreat her?" Reynolds shot Briggs and Denton a sharp look before answering, "Yes." "Then this isn't a misunderstanding," Vanessa said icily. "This is misconduct." Briggs finally found his voice. "Wait, this isn't fair. We were just doing our jobs." "Doing your jobs?" Vanessa repeated, stepping toward him. "Your job is to uphold the law, not abuse it. Your job is to protect and serve, not profile and harass. Tell me, Officer Briggs, when was the last time you arrested a white woman for standing outside a store?" Briggs' mouth opened, then closed. He had no answer. Denton, his face pale, tried a different approach. "Look, we didn't know who she was. If we had, we never would have." "And that's exactly the problem," Olivia cut in sharply. "You treated me this way because you assumed I was just another black woman who wouldn't fight back. You never thought for a second that I might have power, that I might know my rights. But every black woman, every black person deserves that same respect, whether they're the chief prosecutor or not." Vanessa turned to Reynolds. "Captain, these two officers have violated civil rights laws, engaged in racial profiling, and conducted an unlawful arrest. Effective immediately, they are to be placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation." Briggs and Denton's eyes widened. "Wait, you can't do that." "I can," Vanessa cut in coldly, "and I just did." Reynolds nodded stiffly. "Understood." Vanessa stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the room once more. "Let me be clear. This department is now under review. If I find any pattern of misconduct, any sign that what happened to Olivia is happening to others, there will be consequences." Silence. Not a single officer dared to speak. Then Vanessa turned back to Olivia. "Let's get out of here." As they walked out, the entire precinct watched, knowing that things would never be the same again. By the time Olivia and Attorney General Vanessa Hughes stepped out of the precinct, the media had already arrived. The flashing lights of cameras illuminated the night as reporters swarmed the entrance, microphones thrust forward, eager for a statement. Someone had leaked the incident, perhaps an officer who realized the weight of what had just happened. "Ms. Brooks, is it true that you were unlawfully detained?" one reporter shouted. "Ms. Brooks, do you believe racial profiling was involved?" another pressed. Olivia glanced at Vanessa, who gave a slight nod of approval. She took a deep breath before turning to face the cameras. "Yes, what happened to me tonight was not just an unlawful arrest. It was a violation of my civil rights, and it's something that happens to countless Black Americans every single day." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. "I was profiled, harassed, and detained for no reason other than the color of my skin. But let me be clear, this isn't just about me. It's about the system that allows officers like Briggs and Denton to operate without fear of consequences." Vanessa stepped forward, her voice powerful and unwavering. "And those consequences are coming." Gasps rippled through the reporters. "I am launching a full-scale investigation into the department, its officers, and any history of racial profiling and misconduct," Vanessa continued. "If there is a pattern of abuse, rest assured, we will uncover it, and justice will be served." A reporter raised their hand. Attorney General Hughes, what actions will be taken against the officers involved? As of tonight, they are on administrative leave, Vanessa stated, but that is only the beginning. The crowd erupted in a flurry of questions, but Olivia wasn't done yet. She locked eyes with the cameras, addressing the millions who would watch this unfold. This isn't about revenge. This is about change. This is about making sure that no one, no matter their race, gender, or background, has to go through what I did. It's time for accountability, and I won't stop fighting until we get it. The media had their headline, and the police department had a crisis on their hands. Inside the police department, chaos erupted. The moment the press conference aired, phone lines lit up with calls from city officials, activists, and outraged citizens demanding answers. Social media exploded with the footage of Olivia Brooks handcuffed and humiliated, revealing her true identity as the state's chief prosecutor. The hashtag Justice for Olivia began trending within minutes. Captain Rodriguez, the precinct's commanding officer, stormed into his office, slamming the door behind him. Officers Denton and Briggs were already seated, their faces pale. Internal Affairs had launched an immediate investigation, and now they were both on administrative leave, pending review. "What the hell were you two thinking?" Rodriguez bellowed, throwing a copy of the morning newspaper onto his desk. The front page headline read, "Racist Cops Arrest Chief Prosecutor, State Launches Investigation." Briggs swallowed hard. "Captain, we didn't know who she was." "That's the problem," Rodriguez snapped. "It doesn't matter who she was. What matters is that you two idiots racially profiled a woman with no probable cause, violated her rights, and now the entire department is under a damn microscope." Denton fidgeted in his chair. "Captain, maybe if we issue an apology." Rodriguez cut him off with a sharp glare. "You think an apology is going to fix this? The Attorney General is breathing down our necks, the mayor is demanding action, and the community is furious. You just handed them every reason they need to demand major reforms, and you better believe they're coming." Meanwhile, in the break room, a group of officers watched the news replaying Olivia's statement. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others shook their heads. "She's not wrong," one officer muttered. "This department's got problems." Another scoffed. "We're supposed to protect and serve, not target people based on race." A tense silence settled over the room. Back in his office, Rodriguez took a deep breath, rubbing his temples. "Listen to me. You both better get your affairs in order, because I promise you, this isn't going away anytime soon." Across town, Olivia sat in her office, preparing her next move. This wasn't just about her. This was about justice. The fallout from Olivia's wrongful arrest sent shockwaves through the city. Protests erupted outside the police station, with crowds chanting, "No justice, no peace," and holding signs that read, "End racial profiling and fire the corrupt cops." The media covered every angle of the scandal, bringing renewed scrutiny to the police department's history of misconduct. News anchors dissected Olivia's speech, while legal analysts speculated on what actions she would take next. Meanwhile, inside City Hall, the mayor called an emergency meeting. Seated at the long mahogany table were the chief of police, the district attorney, and several top city officials. The tension in the room was thick. The mayor's face was grim as he tapped a stack of reports. "This is a disaster," he said. "Olivia Brooks is one of the most powerful prosecutors in the state, and two of our officers just humiliated her on camera. Do you have any idea what this means for us?" The chief of police, an older man with graying hair, sighed. "I've already suspended Officers Denton and Briggs. Internal Affairs is investigating." The district attorney shook his head. "That won't be enough. The public wants accountability. They want reform." "And what does Olivia Brooks want?" someone asked. Silence filled the room. Across town, Olivia sat at her desk, reviewing files on past cases of racial profiling. She had received hundreds of emails from citizens sharing their own experiences of unjust treatment. Some stories were eerily similar to hers. Black men and women harassed, detained, and arrested for no reason. Her phone rang. It was the Attorney General. "Olivia, I've seen the footage. This is bigger than just two bad cops. We need to make a move." Olivia exhaled slowly. She had already decided. "I'm filing federal charges," she said, "and I'm pushing for systemic reform. It's time to clean house." The city was bracing for a storm, and Olivia was leading the charge. Olivia Brooks wasn't just seeking justice for herself, she was about to shake the entire system. Early the next morning, she walked into the U.S. District Court with a team of attorneys and officially filed federal charges against Officers Denton and Briggs for civil rights violations, false arrest, and misconduct. The news spread like wildfire. State's chief prosecutor files federal charges against cops who arrested her. Every major network covered the story. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, bombarding Olivia with questions. Ms. Brooks, do you think these officers will be convicted? Will you seek changes within the police department? Are you planning a lawsuit against the city? Olivia stopped and faced the cameras. This isn't just about me. This is about every black man and woman who has been unjustly arrested, harassed, or mistreated by those who swore to protect and serve. I'm not just pressing charges, I'm demanding systemic change. Her words electrified the nation. Back at the police station, the atmosphere was tense. Officers Denton and Briggs were sitting in a conference room, both pale and shaken. They had been placed on administrative leave, but they knew it was only the beginning. The chief of police stormed in, slamming a folder onto the table. "Do you two have any idea what you've done?" he barked. "We're under federal investigation because of you." Denton swallowed hard. "Chief, we didn't know who she was." "That's the problem. It shouldn't have mattered who she was," the chief snapped. "You think this is bad? Just wait until the trial starts." Meanwhile, Olivia's office was flooded with civil rights attorneys, activists, and politicians offering their support. The Attorney General called again. "Olivia, this case has national attention. Are you sure you're ready for this fight?" Olivia's jaw tightened. "I've never been more ready." The battle had begun, and Olivia wasn't backing down. The police department was in chaos. The moment Olivia Brooks's case hit the national news, city officials started scrambling. The mayor called an emergency meeting, the police union issued a defensive statement, and the public was demanding answers. Inside the station, Chief Reynolds sat behind his desk, rubbing his temples. He had worked decades to keep the department's reputation intact, but now, thanks to Denton and Briggs, they were at the center of a federal investigation. His office door swung open. Deputy Commissioner Harris walked in, tossing a thick folder on his desk. "They're done, Chief. We need to terminate Denton and Briggs before this gets worse." Reynolds sighed. "If we fire them now, the union will fight back. We need to let internal affairs handle it first." Harris shook his head. "We don't have time for that. The public is watching. The governor is watching." Meanwhile, Denton and Briggs sat in an interrogation room, waiting for their fate. Their badges and guns had already been confiscated. The weight of their actions was sinking in. "This is insane," the Briggs muttered. "All this over one woman?" Denton looked down. "Not just any woman, the chief prosecutor." Briggs scoffed. "You think she's really going to take us down?" The door opened, and two internal affairs investigators stepped in. They sat down across from the officers, setting up a recording device. "Officers Denton and Briggs, we are conducting an internal investigation into the unlawful arrest of Chief Prosecutor Olivia Brooks. Everything you say will be recorded and used in further proceedings." Denton's throat tightened. He knew what this meant. They weren't just facing suspension. They were facing criminal charges. Meanwhile, at City Hall, Mayor Randall stood at the podium, addressing the press. "The actions of Officers Denton and Briggs do not reflect the values of our city or our police department. We will ensure that justice is served." But as Olivia watched the press conference from her office, she wasn't convinced. Words meant nothing without real action, and she wasn't stopping until justice was served. Olivia Brooks sat at her desk, her phone buzzing nonstop. Calls were coming in from civil rights groups, journalists, and even the Attorney General's office. The pressure on the city was mounting, and she knew this was her moment to push for real change. Her assistant, Rachel, stepped in. "The governor wants a meeting. He's worried about the political fallout." Olivia smirked. "Good. Let's make sure he knows just how serious this is." Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Denton and Briggs were officially charged. The internal affairs investigators laid it out clearly: misconduct, false arrest, abuse of power. But the real bombshell came when federal prosecutors announced they were stepping in. Denton's face went pale. "Wait, the feds, this is just a procedural mistake." The lead investigator leaned forward. No, this was targeted harassment, and now it's a civil rights case. Briggs slammed his fist on the table. This is bull. Enough. A new voice interrupted. Olivia Brooks walked in, her presence commanding the room. Denton swallowed hard. This was the first time he'd seen her since the arrest. You two thought you could treat me like any other black woman you've harassed over the years, she said, her voice calm but sharp. But you made a fatal mistake, Briggs scoffed. Yeah? What's that? Olivia leaned in. I'm the one who decides whether you go to prison. Silence filled the room. Over the next few days, the city watched as the case unfolded. Olivia made sure the officers weren't just fired. She pushed for criminal indictments. The police union tried to fight back, but the overwhelming public outrage made it impossible for them to protect Denton and Briggs. The governor, under immense pressure, called for a statewide review of policing policies. Olivia wasn't stopping there. She had a bigger plan. She wasn't just seeking justice for herself. She was about to change the system. The media storm was relentless. Every major news outlet ran the story. Racist cops arrest black woman. Turns out she's the state's chief prosecutor. The footage of Olivia Brooks, calm yet furious in that interrogation room, had gone viral. This isn't just about me, Olivia told reporters outside the courthouse. This is about every black woman who's been silenced, every person of color who's been mistreated by the system that's supposed to protect them. Public protests erupted outside the police headquarters. Activists, politicians, and community leaders demanded action. Olivia met with civil rights groups, strategizing on how to turn this momentum into lasting reform. Meanwhile, Denton and Briggs were scrambling. Their lawyers were arguing that their actions weren't racially motivated, just a misunderstanding. But internal affairs had uncovered more. A deep dive into their records showed a pattern. Over a dozen misconduct complaints, almost all against black citizens. The DA's office had enough evidence to charge them with civil rights violations and abuse of authority. Denton paced in his lawyer's office. This is getting out of hand. We'll never work again. His lawyer sighed. Forget about working. You need to worry about staying out of prison. At City Hall, Olivia faced off with the police commissioner and the mayor. This department has been ignoring racial profiling for years, Olivia said, her voice unwavering. That ends today. The mayor shifted uncomfortably. What exactly do you want? Independent oversight of police misconduct, immediate retraining, and most importantly, real accountability. The police commissioner clenched his jaw. You're asking for too much. Olivia stared him down. No, I'm asking for justice. She wasn't just taking on two bad cops, she was going after the entire system. The city was on edge. Olivia Brooks had done more than expose two corrupt officers. She had ignited a movement. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, demanding justice, while news outlets continued to dissect every detail of the case. Meanwhile, Denton and Briggs sat in separate holding cells, waiting for their arraignment. The weight of their actions had finally caught up to them. They weren't just facing public scrutiny, they were staring down criminal charges. Inside the courtroom, the judge didn't waste time. Officers Denton and Briggs, you are charged with false imprisonment, misconduct, and violation of civil rights. How do you plead? Not guilty, Denton muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Briggs, sweating, followed suit. Not guilty. The judge glanced at Olivia. Miss Brooks, as the state's chief prosecutor, do you have any preliminary statements? Olivia stood, her presence commanding the room. Your Honor, this case is about more than just two bad cops. It's about a system that has allowed abuse to go unchecked. We will present overwhelming evidence that these officers engaged in racial profiling and illegal detainment. This is about accountability. The judge nodded. Understood. Bail is denied. Court adjourned. Outside, the crowd erupted into cheers as news of the bail denial spread. The people wanted justice, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like they might get it. Back at her office, Olivia sat down with her legal team. We're not just taking down Denton and Briggs, she said, scanning a list of officers with misconduct complaints. We're cleaning house. This wasn't just a case. It was the start of a war against corruption. The courtroom was packed as the trial of officers Denton and Briggs reached its climax. Olivia Brooks had meticulously built a case that left no room for doubt. Surveillance footage, body cam records, and testimony from witnesses painted a damning picture of racial profiling, abuse of power, and systemic corruption. The jury deliberated for hours, but when they returned, their verdict was swift. We, the jury, find the defendants guilty on all charges. A collective gasp filled the courtroom before cheers erupted outside. Justice had been served. Denton and Briggs sat motionless. Their arrogance had been stripped away, replaced with disbelief. They were led away in handcuffs, the same way they had once paraded innocent people through the streets. Outside, the media swarmed Olivia. "Miss Brooks, what does this verdict mean for law enforcement moving forward?" She took a deep breath before answering. "This is only the beginning. Our justice system must hold every officer accountable, not just the ones caught on camera. This case sends a message. Abuse of power will not be tolerated." The mayor soon announced a citywide review of police practices, pledging reform. Several officers resigned, while others were placed under investigation. Change was happening, and Olivia was at the forefront of it. Later that night, Olivia sat in her office, exhausted but satisfied. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You did good today, but be careful. Not everyone wants change." She stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. She knew the fight wasn't over, but tonight, justice had won. Injustice thrives in silence. Please subscribe, like, share this story to raise awareness about racial profiling and the abuse of power in law enforcement. Hold authorities accountable by staying informed, voting for fair policies, and supporting leaders who fight for justice. If you believe in equality, speak up, take action, and demand change. Together, we can build a system that protects everyone, not just a select few.